Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. Tonight, if you like standardized tests every year in the public schools, maybe you'll love standardized tests every 6 to 8 weeks. We'll get details on a new plan for the city schools. First, we'll give you a rare glimpse behind the scenes in a police video. It's Howard Beach bias crime defendant Nicholas Minucci being interrogated about his baseball bat attack on a black man. And we'll see Hillary Clinton and Eliot Spitzer at the New York State Democratic Convention. And let's start right there. Here is Senator Clinton speaking today at the convention in Buffalo. Now you tell me, is she running for Senate or president? Let's watch.
We could, in America, become a net exporter of new energy technology and employ thousands and thousands of Americans in good, high-paying jobs. You know, it's an old saying, but when it comes to energy, it is true. You're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem, and it's time for the oil companies to be part of the solution for the sake of our country's future.
Joining me now in our studio is Daily News columnist Errol Lewis. Hi, Errol.
Hi.
So was that speech for a New York audience or for national consumption?
Well, to be fair to the senator, there was a strictly New York part of the speech early on where she talked about alternative fuels, you know, turning vegetable grease into diesel oil in Syracuse or in Western New York and that sort of thing, places where they are actually desperate for jobs. So she was playing to a little bit of the audience. It's interesting, though, she didn't play to her base, and that's a very sort of Clintonian sort of strategy if you think back to her husband, the president.
What base is that?
Well, I mean, the feminists in New York City, the liberals in New York City, the anti-war people who I guess are all over the state but concentrated in New York City, those are the people who are going to be with Hillary till the last dog dies, as her husband used to say. But she didn't pander to them. She barely even addressed them. I mean, she gave them a little red meat in the form of attacks on the federal administration, on the Bush administration. But that's not really what the business at hand is here in New York. So she was kind of talking to the upstate people who I think you always have to massage a little bit. And she was talking about 2008.
She was talking over their heads to the National Press Corps. It'll be interesting to see.
International.
Even international. But it'll be interesting to see how this gets reported tomorrow in papers, not just in New York and Albany and Syracuse and Buffalo, but in Omaha and Sacramento and places like that.
Yeah, the early AP wire stories say that she was unrelentingly on the attack going after the Bush administration, which is a fair way to characterize it.
Sure was. Now here's another clip of Senator Clinton at the convention today, this time what to do about Iraq.
Stand with me as we push the Bush administration to take responsibility for the mistakes and misjudgments that they have made around the world. And stand with me as we put pressure on both the administration and the new Iraqi government to get behind a real plan for the Iraqis to assume a growing responsibility for their own security and safety so that we can begin to bring our troops home.
Now, Errol, is that a stand on the war?
Well, I don't know if stand is always a tricky word to use with Hillary Clinton, but those phrases could have come out of the mouth of John Kerry or out of the words of John Edwards. I mean, this was a presidential stump speech. The Democratic Party, and this is one of the party's leaders, Senator Clinton, is trying to sort of stake out a position, trying to figure out what's going to work, what's going to be something that they can run on that won't blow up in their face, the way opposition to the war blew up in John Kerry's face.
Right. But it's really not a plan, is it? Start to develop whatever the words were so that the Iraqi government can take responsibility for themselves. But she didn't say when or how.
Well, that's right. In fact, the problem that the Democrats are facing is if you have a specific timetable, and John Kerry has ventured into those waters and said, look, you know, let's get them all out by date X, May 15th, June 15th, I think he said. That comes under harsh attack as being unrelated to the military realities. If you go in the other direction, which is what Clinton has done, it takes you 10 minutes to explain your position, and the voters think that you're wishy-washy and you're a flip-flopper.
In fact, in this year where the Democrats stand a chance of taking back control of Congress, the knock on them is that they're very good at criticizing Republican rule, but they really haven't come up with specific ideas about what they'll do.
Right, but I mean,
not just about the war.
It's an old adage in politics that if your opponent is falling, you just step out of the way. So I don't think Democrats can or should be looking to sort of figure out how they're going to run the country and the war while they're campaigning. There'll be time for that afterwards.
Before we go on to Eliot Spitzer, I had Jonathan Ticini on my radio show the other day. Not a well-known, excuse me, not a well-known name in New York, but he might be, because he is the Democrat running to the progressive left of Senator Clinton, hoping to get on the ballot and challenge her in the primary. Now, in Connecticut, there's a guy who's making national news, Ned Lamont, trying to knock Joe Lieberman out of the race by unseating him in a primary, running against his pro-war stance. Ned Lamont went to the Democratic Convention in Connecticut and got 1/3 of the delegates, guaranteeing a primary. Why isn't Jonathan Ticini the Ned Lamont of New York?
Well, for one thing, I think Senator Clinton hasn't gone nearly as far as Senator Lieberman has, as far as support for the administration's basic take on the war, basic framework of how to conduct the war and foreign policy in general. She's been much more cautious. He hasn't been on the front lines the way Lieberman has. So that's one reason. The other is, Connecticut voters are famously independent. Lowell Weicker, who shifted parties and shifted positions. There's this irascible streak that runs through the Connecticut electorate, where they've got Republicans who are moderates and Democrats who are conservative. And that's not really how the party works in New York. I mean, you've got somebody like Clinton who's just a star. I mean, we've got stars. Lieberman's not a star in the way that Hillary Clinton is. And Ticini represents, there are Greens and there are progressives, and they have always had a left critique of mainstream Democrats.
All right. Now let's take a brief look at Eliot Spitzer, telling the Democratic Convention he'll shake things up as governor.
Now it's time for change. In this campaign, we are fighting for the very soul of government, the very future of New York. The crowd in charge in Albany is out of touch, out of ideas, and come January 1st, they'll be out of time.
Now, what's interesting to me about that? He didn't just say Governor Pataki will be out of time. He didn't say the Republicans will be out of time. He said the crowd in Albany, out of touch, out of ideas, and they'll be out of time. And the crowd in Albany, let's face it, is basically three guys: Pataki, Senate Majority Leader Joe Bruno, who's a Republican, and Sheldon Silver, who runs the Assembly, who's a Democrat from Manhattan. Was he taking a swipe at Sheldon Silver?
I don't know if I would call it that, but if it wasn't my imagination, I think the crowd sort of died down at certain points when he talked about doing away with cronyism and with people having appointees who aren't qualified for office.
Because these are party convention delegates. They are the cronies.
Well, they in fact are. They in fact are. And Silver was undoubtedly sitting in the front row. I don't know if he was clapping too loudly for some of these applause lines. I mean, the reality is that Spitzer is campaigning as if it was late October, as if he was running a general election against a Republican. And he has the luxury to do that because he's 50-plus points ahead of his nearest Democratic rival.
Well, not only that nearest Democratic rival, Nassau County Executive Tom Suozzi, has made his statewide reputation on this fix Albany, buck your party leaders platform. And so I guess Spitzer, even though he's so far ahead in the polls, probably feels he needs to defend himself against Suozzi's one major attack.
Well, yeah, it's easy enough to steal Suozzi's thunder. There's part of me that, as a pro-reform sort of a guy, you kind of hope that with his enormous popularity and with the fact that he's essentially going to coast into office or easily step into office,
anyway,
that Spitzer really might sort of put some pressure on these guys to change the way business is done. I mean, he might actually be talking about a governing strategy. He might actually be talking about change. I mean, he's been there for 7 years, and his Republican opponent is never going to stop reminding us that he somehow never managed to do any of this in the last 7 years. But it may be a different story when he gets to the State House.
One other race that's interesting, the the Senate nomination on the Republican side. There were two speeches at the Republican convention on Long Island today, and there was sort of a nomination of John Spencer, the former mayor of Yonkers. There's also a former Reagan administration official, K.T. McFarland, and I guess they both get to be on a primary ballot now?
Well, Spencer came out far ahead in the polling, but there will, in fact, be a primary.
He got like 60-something% of the delegates.
68%, that's right.
But she only needed 25% of the delegates to get on the ballot.
And she exceeded that, and she's on the ballot. And it's going to be an interesting sort of, I don't want to call it a sideshow, but it's going to be a very interesting, I mean, it's gotten dirty and filthy already. I mean, they're calling each other bigamists, and they're sort of slinging mud over what ultimately is a chance to go up against a hugely popular, very well-funded incumbent named Hillary Clinton. And so it's one of these cases where, precisely because there's so little to lose, people are fighting very, very hard.
By the way, how do you get to be a delegate to one of these conventions?
Oh my goodness, the party rules, I wouldn't even venture to try and explain it in any kind of real detail, but basically what it amounts to is each county organization has its own rules, and the parties themselves have their own rules, and there are these weighted votes. So you can double as a state representative. You could be an assembly person or a Senate chair or a party district leader, and also be a delegate to this convention. And it's just a small piece of patronage that's added to a lot of the insiders' titles.
Cronies.
Friends. I think they'll say leaders.
New topic. Last week on the show, we had an opponent of the Atlantic Yards project in Brooklyn, which I believe you support. The arena for the Nets and the 16 high-rise apartment and office buildings. And our discussion revolved mostly around the scale of the project, how immense it is compared to the neighborhood, and a brochure, a promotional flyer that was sent to thousands of people in Brooklyn promoting the idea that my guest said was extremely deceptive. Now, I want to show you why this brochure was described as deceptive and get your reaction. So, can we put up this visual? Now, this is from the brochure itself, and on the top here, Errol, we are looking at a pretty much empty strip of abandoned rail yards, right?
Yep.
Railroad tracks. So the point of the brochure is to say how ugly this is up there. We're going to turn it into this beautiful thing down here. And it looks like a big park with some nice red arches or benches or whatever those things are in it. But really, that's an aerial view of what will be huge towers.
Yeah, it's a top-down view of the site.
Right,
yeah.
but it just looks like this big park. So let's go to the next slide, because the opponents, the opponents say that if they were going to be honest, here's what they should have shown. These are two different pictures of the architect's plans for the site, July 2005 version on top, a version from this month on the bottom, but that this is what was not included in the brochure that should have been in order to tell Brooklyn what this is really going to be in the middle of their brownstone backyards. What do you think about this?
Well, I mean, two things. One is that if you were going to show the latter models, you'd probably need as much explanation as if you were going to try and explain the top-down view that you showed the first time. Because what you've got there are massing models. You know, there's this one building that is being dubbed Miss Brooklyn that has some design and some shape to it, but the rest of them are what architects call a massing model, where you just try to indicate how much space is going to be under that roof. It doesn't really talk about the setbacks. It doesn't talk about how high it's going to rise. It doesn't really get into any of that stuff. So if you haven't worked that out, it's almost just as misleading to sort of throw something in somebody's face and say, I'm going to put a gigantic block of buildings right next to you. The other point, though, when the charge is repeated over and over and over again that this is out of scale and out of context, I mean, it really relies on people not going to the site and not knowing the neighborhood. Now, I've lived there for a long, long time. My dad bought our house in the 1950s, when those rails looked just like that, by the way.
And here the viewers are seeing now another rendition of some of what this might look like. And certainly if you think of that neighborhood in Brooklyn as full of the old brownstones, the question is this in scale with the neighborhood?
Yeah, but see, you know, in that picture, on the if the glassed-in building to the left, if you go a couple of blocks right past that, is a place called the Atlantic Terminal Houses. It's a public housing building. It's a 31-story tower. It's the tallest one in the city's public housing inventory. It's the biggest public housing building in New York City. There's 679 people living there. It was built in 1976. This is not just a place where there's a lot of brownstones. There are tall buildings down there already. There's the Williamsburg Savings Bank building, which is the tallest one in Brooklyn, which is down there. There are, you know, again, the famous 10 train lines that all run through there. You know, if you're not from New York and you looked at a subway map, you would think that Atlantic Terminal is the center of the city. It's
because
where really,
every subway line stops
plus
there.
A couple of commuter lines. So it's, you know, I think the question is, there are critics who really just don't want any project there at all, and they often don't come out and say it, but that happens to be true. I think the real question about density is how much density, should we do it, you know, who wants it to happen, and how do we bargain over it. But the opportunity to bargain over it, and this is a project that was first announced 3 years ago, was lost, I would say squandered, by many opponents of the plan, who decided that the best way to proceed was to throw up a lot of roadblocks, to adopt an adversarial stance.
But they do have an alternative plan that they put up, the Extel plan, that they say is still some high-rise, still an arena for the Nets, but more in scale with the neighborhood.
No, the Extel plan is a non-starter. I mean, it was, aside from the fact that the state, which controls much of the land, the Empire State Development Corporation, rejected that plan, the plan's developer is not fighting for a seat at the table. I mean, that's a dead letter at this point. I mean, the smart thing to do would be to sit down and negotiate and try and change the plan, not pretend to change it when you actually want to kill it.
All right, the Atlantic Yards debate goes on. Let's change topics again now. You've probably heard about the bias crime assault trial of 19-year-old Nicholas Minucci from Howard Beach. He's pleading self-defense and claiming there was no bias in his use of the N-word when he hit a black man named Glenn Moore with a baseball bat. The tape we are about to see is about 4 minutes of the actual police interrogation video of Minucci on the night of his arrest last June. The bleeps in this tape are mostly covering his use of the N-word. Let's watch.
All right, now, you and Anthony are driving around, then you go down by the weeds and you see the 3 kids.
Yes.
What do you say to Anthony? What does Anthony say to you? Who says what?
No, I saw the kids.
Right, what'd you say?
I was coming up the avenue and I saw them. I was like, I think that's them. I think that's them. Because I didn't see the kid with the red shirt. I only saw blue and white.
Right.
And I go back around the corner. Sherry, the kid with the red shirt was standing right there.
And what'd you do?
I jumped out of the car. I was like, what up? Like that. The kid, the 3 of them are standing there against me and my financial. He's a big kid. He's like maybe 6'3", something pounds. He's a big boy. And they're standing there.
How big are you?
I'm 5'7".
How much you weigh?
240.
All right, and where'd the bag come from?
My car.
Do you always keep it in your car?
No.
No, why was it there that night?
Well, it's always in my trunk, not in my car.
It's always in the trunk, but
Yeah.
it's always in the vehicle, someplace.
Yeah.
All right. So when you get out, you're like, hey,
But don't get me wrong, if you pass by my park, we're always playing baseball. We're always playing. Constantly. You can check the bat, there's grass all over it.
all right. So now, when you get out of the truck, do you have the bat in your hand?
No, not yet.
All right, and then you say, hey, what's up?
Oh, no, I said, what up? Like
Okay.
that.
And what did he say back to you?
He goes, what up? Like, ready to fight.
And what'd you do at that point?
I grabbed the bat.
And at that point,
All 3 of them started running. I'm running after them. I'm 240 pounds. These are 3 skinny kids. 2 of them ran in the weeds. The other kid, he hid. It was on 78th Street. I couldn't get after them, so my friend Anthony jumped in the driver's seat. He goes, get in. I go up the block, I go around, I see 2 of them running in the weeds. In the corner of my eye, I see this kid standing like by a bush. I jumped out of the truck with the bat, and I started chasing him.
So that's the kid with the red shirt?
Yeah, that's where I caught him on 79th Street. He ran right around the corner.
all right, I just want to make it
over
clear.
the thing.
So you pull up in the truck, the 3 of them standing there, you get out
Without a bat.
without the bat, you say, what's up? He says, what's up? Then you go, you grab the bat, and these 3 guys run away.
Run.
At this point, Anthony gets into the driver's seat,
Yes.
and he says, get in, and then you drive around the corner. And when you get around the corner, you see the 2 guys, the blue and white shirt, running into the weeds.
When I wasn't running in the weeds.
Why not?
I'm not running in the weeds. Especially not those weeds.
And where do you see the red shirt?
If there's witnesses, the witnesses will tell you where the kid was standing.
Well,
he was standing like trying to hide behind, like, you know the little trees they got in front of the house?
You like tall, narrow tree?
Yeah. He was trying to hide behind one of them.
All right, and at that point you got out of the truck?
I jumped right out.
With the bat?
Yeah.
All right, and where was Anthony?
Look, he was in the car.
And what happened when you jumped out of the car the second time with the bat?
I chased the kid.
Were you saying anything? Were you screaming anything? Were you just running after
I
him?
wasn't screaming nothing. I didn't, honestly, didn't think I was going to catch him. I was getting out of breath. I was wheezing. I started getting slower. I stopped for a couple of seconds. And as soon as I stopped, I'm sorry, but he was running and he just fell right on the floor.
When he went down, what were you thinking?
What do you mean was I thinking?
Well, when you saw him go down, you're out of breath, you're running after him.
I ran right over to him.
And then you see him go down. In your mind, what do you say?
I'm going to get him.
All right, and you ran over there with the bat, and then now he's on the floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where is he injured now?
Yeah.
Where?
Head.
Where on his head?
Could I get up and show you? Or do you want me to sit?
No, you can get up if you want. That's all right. Yes, no.
He was running. He was running from behind a car. Okay, so now he's running in front of the car. He didn't see that there was a brick thing on the side of the car. Now he's trying to run diagonal again, and he fell and went like this.
So he's like that,
and just smashed. And now he went to get up, and that's when I came and I hit him right here.
Okay.
And he went back down.
All right. So when he tripped, he spun and fell on the side of his head.
Yes. And you could see, if you look at his head, you could see that that's from a cement mark, not from a bat. Because the kid said to me purposely, he goes, "You hit me in the head." You could see on his head that that's scraped, not from a bat.
Now, is he bleeding at this point?
I don't know. I saw the kid holding his head like this.
So now he's on the ground. Now, he's laying on his stomach holding his head?
Yeah.
All right. And what's he saying?
I didn't do nothing. I says, "Look at me."
And did he?
Yeah.
So that is part of the police interrogation video of Nicholas Minucci last June 28th, as you saw the date on the screen. Errol Lewis, we're going to get into some larger issues regarding this trial in a minute, but that tape, would a defendant or a suspect at that point know that he was being videotaped by the police?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean,
he would know that a tape is rolling?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this particular defendant, I don't know. I mean, they call him Fat Nick. They don't call him Smart Nick.
But they didn't tell him? They wouldn't, as a matter of course?
Well, I'll tell you what, they don't have to. Police do not have to. The police are allowed to do all kinds of trickery and so forth. They can record you without you knowing it. They can pretend to be someone else. They can tell you things that aren't true about the case. They can tell you the guy died and all of this kind of thing to try and elicit some sort of truth. I mean, he didn't seem to need much prompting, frankly.
No, in fact, one of the things about that, to me, is that he seems extremely unself-conscious and like he kind of believes what he's saying.
Well, not just that, but I mean, under the rules the rules of engagement, as he seems to understand them, what he did was what he did. Somebody comes in the neighborhood, you take the bat out of your trunk, not the car, but the trunk, and you can smash him in the head with it if that's what you want to do. Right. And I don't know if that's going to work for him very well at trial. All questions of the N-word aside.
And he said he smashed him in the back, not in the head, and he was doing that dance to indicate that he fractured his skull by falling down.
He fractured his own skull on the sidewalk.
And he claimed that earlier in the evening, Glenn Moore, the victim, had tried to rob him.
Yeah, I mean, this is something our editorial board, we call this mope against mope. I mean, this is kids really acting kind of dumb in the middle of the night. The larger questions that have cropped up around it really dress up what, in some ways, was one of these kind of really unfortunate things where you kind of wish you could grab everybody and take them all downtown and sort it out.
We're going to talk about the use of the N-word and its place in this case with our next guest in just a minute. But the issue of the bias crime, you've written about this. Does it matter if he hit Glenn Moore, wherever he hit him, with a baseball bat because he's black and he hates blacks, or if because he's a vigilante and he thinks it's his job to protect the neighborhood, or for whatever reason?
I'm skeptical about hate crimes legislation and punishment, and this is one of these cases where I think it's one of the reasons I'm skeptical. It probably doesn't apply here. I mean, if what he himself said in the tape that you showed is true, he very likely tried to kill this guy. I mean, you can kill somebody by smashing them in the head or the back or any place else with a baseball bat. Now, to triple or double up the penalties because he added insult to injury, that seems to me an inquiry that a court probably shouldn't be wasting its time on. I mean, it seems to me if you get into altercations on the street and you hit somebody in the head with a bat, whatever penalties we've got as a society, I think that should be sufficient.
30 seconds. His defense, part of it, is that people in hip-hop culture, and he considers himself, though he's white, part of hip-hop culture, use the N-word all the time, just like you'd say dude. Do you buy that?
No. I mean, the middle of the night, chasing people with a bat, tripping them so that they knock themselves out or whatever it is that really happened.
And you're white and he's black.
And you're white and he's black. I can't see if there's any situation where it might be used as other than a term of endearment or a synonym for Mr. I think that would probably be it.
Errol Lewis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, more on the use of the N-word beyond the Nick Minucci trial. We will talk to two people who are trying to get African Americans to stop using the word with each other. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Do you want to complete your college degree while balancing career and family obligations? Do you want a flexible schedule and a challenging curriculum? If you've earned at least 30 credits or an associate degree, now's your chance to finish what you started at CUNY. Learn about CUNY's online baccalaureate in communication and culture. Visit cuny.edu/online or call 212-652-CUNY. For the last 5 years, CUNY Television, in association with the New York Times, has brought you Times Talks, a presentation of panel discussions and interviews with extraordinary talents from the worlds of music, art, film, television, theater, literature, politics, and journalism. Recorded during the annual New York Times Arts and Leisure Weekends, each presentation is moderated by New York Times editors, critics, and reporters. CUNY Television is proud to continue to bring you this fabulous series. Join us every Friday for a new Times Talks. Log on to CUNY.TV for the series schedule. You're watching CUNY TV, lifelong learning through quality television.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesdays at 7:30. As we just discussed, Nicholas Minucci is on trial for a hate crime because he used the N-word when he clubbed a black man last summer. Minucci claims it is now an acceptable greeting in hip-hop circles, but others disagree. In fact, 2 Brooklynites have started a project and a website taking aim at the broad use of the N-word among African Americans. It's called AbolishTheNword.com. The site's co-founders, Jill Merrit and Kovan join me now. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So, first of all, on the trial, and Nick Minucci's claim that the N-word is generally used now in hip-hop culture. Do you buy it?
Actually, no, because for the simple fact that a lot of us don't address each other that way. A lot of us say, and to use that slang terminology, we might say, hey, what's up, son, fam, or anything like what's up, dude. We don't all use that terminology to address each other in hip-hop.
Not all, and certainly not to defend Nick Minucci on this basis. But, but Jill, many folk do, right? I mean, I'll tell you, I belong to a gym where the majority of the clientele is African American. So I'm here, guys in a locker room, day after day after day, and they address each other that way a lot.
Well, there are people who use the term, and as we found out since we've started this campaign, there are a lot more people who don't use the term. And we're getting support throughout the country from people who say, I hate that term. It seems that the youth are using the term more than the adults. The teachers are supporting us and saying, you know, how can we get our kids to stop using the term? But in regards to hip-hop, I'm not sure how the N-word is seen as hip-hop. The N-word is not hip-hop. And it's my hope that someone from the hip-hop community will come out and say, this is not hip-hop. Or they can admit that they use it, they can admit that it's in their songs or their rap songs, but just say that the N-word is not hip-hop.
We're opening our phones. You can call us up and tell us if you use the N-word casually, especially if you're African American. Do you use it with your friends? Does it just mean mister or dude or buddy or something like that? Is it neutral? If you use it, what about the historical context? Does it matter? If not, why doesn't it matter? Call us up, 212-251-0801. You see the number on your screen, 251-0801. Why are you on this crusade?
Well, first for myself, I mean, I ride the train, I ride the bus, and just to see, like, just young kids to address each other that way, at some time and point, it's just sickening. You know, to hear them say it and to see older people, you know, just cringe every time. And it's like, you know, they're just blanking out. They're not even just looking. They're just like, using the term, cursing, you know, and it's like, don't you see this elderly black person here, or, you know, don't you see this person, you know, that's older than you? Where's the respect? Where's the decency, you know, just to have some type of courtesy? And it's like, to see that, you know, to see young girls talk this way, it's like, wow, is it that, you know, are we that comfortable, you know, is anyone even trying to talk to them, you know, to straighten this matter out?
So, well,
you
when
know?
you put it that way, it sounds like you see it like any other swear word.
Yeah, yes, definitely, definitely. And, you know, we sat down and was like, wow, you know, sitting on the outside looking in, it's like, you know what, it's time for someone to say something, because it seems like no one's said anything.
But is it more than that, Jill? Is it also about self-esteem in the community and self-respect?
It is definitely more than a curse word, you know, for me, in that, you know, because I've had to stop cursing, and when I did, I didn't have a historical context to look at, you know, to go back to in the way that you do with the N-word. The N-word is so loaded, so filled with hate, such a vile racial epithet that is something that can never be a term of endearment. And our children, our youth, like the people who will vote when I will maybe too old to get out of the house to vote, they should, you know, have more sense of self-respect. And so the idea is to talk about this word, but also address the ills, the manifestation of this word, and get into why we are using this word.
Let's take a phone call. Ruth in Washington Heights, you're on the air. Hello, Ruth.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, I feel as though my thought is these children are not children, young adults such as Jay-Z and the rappers and the people I see on the subway, the young people coming home from school, running amok on the subway. Every other word is nigger, 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 the N-word, excuse me. I feel as though they're using it because they do not know black history. And they're not being taught black history, so they indiscriminately use this word like it is a slang word. They have no clue how many people died being called the N-word. And people in, I think, the 40s and past that age do not use the words as much as the young kids use.
Ruth, thank you very much. You agree it's generational, right?
I agree that it is generational. I agree that it's generational in that the kids don't link themselves back to the history. Anyone who is over, I'd say like 25 into their 30s, they know the history, and if they use it, they're making a choice. We've started to do an outreach and do some campaigns and go into some of the schools, and we tell the kids, we're giving you a choice. We're not beating people over the head.
Is it a good thing in a way because the word has been drained of its power to harm? If it's being used in an everyday way like this and being used by blacks in New York?
Well,
it would be one thing if I went up to you and said it. It's another thing for you to say it to your buddy on the street.
Well, I mean, in terms of that, I get that a lot. I get that a lot. Well, if it's okay for someone black to say it, why can't someone white or Asian or Hispanic say it? And my answer to them is because I can't call you another word for what you know, represent. I mean, you got to look at it this way. The N-word, I say, is like the root of an abundance of problems within black culture. And, you know, I mean, you got guys that walk around and say, oh, I'm a real N. And you have to look at that like, you mean you want to detach yourself, you know, like, right. What's your problem? I mean, where's the respect for yourself? You know, but to answer your question, actually, I tell a Hispanic friend of mine, you know, look at my history and you'll see why that I don't agree with you.
Now, we're going to put up on the screen your contract. Do we have that ready to go? I think there it is. Abolish the N-word contract from your website. If somebody signs this contract, what are they agreeing to?
They are agreeing to stop using the N-word. They are agreeing that the N-word does not represent or define any culture, class, or group of people. And they are agreeing that the N-word should be used only in regards to historical context and also educational context. And the idea is that you can speak something into existence, and when you write it down, you're also making it plain. It's almost like you're making it concrete when you write it down. And so this is a seed that we're hoping to plant when you sign this contract.
At abolishthennword.com. Umar in Maspeth, you're on the air. Hello, Umar.
Yes, I wanted to talk about when I was in school, high school, 15 years ago, everyone was calling each other the N-word, black and white. I go to my work today, and we got Italian kids. They walk in, you know, and they say, "What's up, nigga?" to the black kids, and they respond.
You're making Nick Minucci's defense for him.
Well, I mean, I think if you realize all these kids that listen to hip-hop, I mean, I got a lot of Spanish kids in my neighborhood. That's how they talk to each other. What's up, nigga? And they start speaking Spanish to each other.
And so how do you react to this? How do you feel about it?
Well, I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, I used to use the same language when I was a teenager, when I was young. Looking back on it, it was rather foolish, but that's with the hip-hop and with a lot of the other things, that's what the kids are growing up. That's a normal way they speak to each other.
So do you think that the campaign that my guests are on is just kind of, I don't know, you know, they're being old fogies, or do you think they're doing something worthwhile here?
Look, I think they're doing something worthwhile, but they're going to reach the educated people who are not using that kind of language anyway. If they think these kids who are out selling crack or robbing people are going to pay attention to the campaign, if they can read complete sentences, you know, they're daydreaming.
All right, I'm going to leave it there, Emma. Thank you very much. Are you preaching to the choir, like he says?
Well, actually, what I do, I approach teens on the street. You know, I mean, I can hear you in mid-conversation, and it's about your approach. It's about your approach. I mean, a lot of guys that I've approached, you know, they've been very, very receptive. I mean, at first they're like, "What you talking about?" You know, but after I get into conversation, we have educate cards that we have online. You know, I pass them the educate cards, and I explain to them like why we shouldn't use the word, where does the root of the word, where does it come from, what does it mean, and you know, at first they say, "Oh man," but then afterwards they're like, "Okay, I'll try," and that's better than nothing.
And funny enough, Jill, once upon a time, it was really the white use of the word that was so damaging. But this whole campaign is basically aimed at black kids, right? It is.
And I say the African American community, and I mean just anyone within the community that wants to listen. Yes, it is. And what we believe is that the use of the word is a manifestation of deeper problem. In our community, we're at the bottom of every good list in terms of education, in terms of jobs and housing, and we're at the top of every bad list when it comes to prisons and reading scores, and when it comes to crime. And so there's a problem there, and it's time that we stop sugarcoating stuff. It's time for us to look at the problem, and it's time for us to talk about what's going on. And I think it's a dialogue that needs to happen within the African American community.
We have a close-up shot set up of your T-shirt. So let's take a look at that. I think you're showing your pecs here, Kovan. Abolish the N-word. It's the letter N with the red circle with the stripe through it. So people can get these T-shirts on your website?
Yes, they can.
They can.
Yeah, they can. Yeah.
Let's get one more call in here. Roosevelt in Harlem, you're on the program. Hello.
Yes, how are you?
Hi.
Good subject.
Thank you.
I'm a little older, so I like to take y'all back a little. There was an entertainer that changed his name legally to the name Nigger Boy. And he had hooked up with Lester Maddox, who was the former governor of Georgia, who also was the one, when they did have integration, chased blacks off his restaurant with a pickaxe.
Famous segregationist
Right.
governor.
I don't know if you remember that, but then you had acts, you had people that would associate, well, isn't there a country in Africa called nigger? And it wasn't nigger, it was Niger, you know. So now you have today people for money selling out their culture and, you know, oh, we can say the word. No, we can't say the word.
Right.
The word was was banned. The word meant something else among blacks. It's different. How are you going to change it to all of a sudden this word means my brother, my friend? No. This is a form of divide and conquer. Now we're doing it to ourselves. Well, let's put the word among them. Let them change it. Let them destroy themselves with it, which is what we're doing.
Roosevelt, thank you very much. Queer. Gays call themselves queer, which used to be derisive. They've adopted it specifically as a way to empower themselves and drain the word of its power to hurt. Why not see it in that light?
Well, I know some gay people, and within their circles, I'm not allowed to use that word, to speak to them or to call them that word. And as far as I know, and although I'm sympathetic to the plight of, you know, homosexuals, because there was a time, and they still are times when they've been harassed and
but they
beaten.
Use it, and when they use about it, they laugh about it, and
right.
they smile about it, and they joke about it.
Right, and this word, the N-word, when I look at the N-word, I don't see the alignment that the N-word has. I don't see queer as that. Excuse me. See. I don't see that as the same. Yeah, it's something. I don't say any racial slurs.
Kovan, a last thought on that. You can call it the Q word if you don't want to say the whole thing.
The Q word. Yes.
I know a few gay people myself. Well, see, there we go. But I mean, I'm not, and I don't mean it in that term. But you know, I mean, hey, if that's the way you want to be, you want to be. But
it's a different.
It's a different it's a different thing, because you got to look at it as, when you use the N word, you got to think about elders, people who've died, you know, with that word being used in vain. I mean, you have to think in those terms, and that's how I just see it. You have to just have that respect.
The campaign is called Abolish the N-word. The website is abolishthenword.com. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for having us.
Coming up, if you like standardized tests every year in the public schools, maybe you'll love standardized tests every 6 to 8 weeks. We'll get details on a new plan for the city schools. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Every single thing we do is recorded. Not only every mouse click, but every purchase.
You look at a single-cell microbe, and his environment changes, and he knows that he has 22 minutes to change or die.
Science can tell us how chemicals bond, but only religion can answer the why questions.
Here's the deal. There's no conflict between science and religion as long as the God you believe in doesn't do anything.
Have a seat at the table as new understandings of ourselves and our universe are bandied about by some of the most astute thinkers alive. Closer to Truth. 15 weeks, 15 subjects.
I'm Robert Lawrence Kuhn. My doctorate is in brain research. I'm an investment banker. I've written lots of books. I wonder all the time. That's why I've brought together the world's most creative thinkers to debate the world's most fundamental issues: cosmology, consciousness, brain and mind, science and religion. That's our show, Closer to Truth, Science, Meaning, and the Future. So join the debates right here on CUNY TV, Channel 75.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. Now, some parents are up in arms about the idea of even more standardized testing in the New York City public schools under a plan being developed by Chancellor Joel Klein. Okay, they call these assessments, not tests. And they say they're designed to help make sure each child is getting the education he or she needs. But let's find out how it will work, and you'll decide whether you think it's a good idea. With me now is Clara Hempill, director of the very informative website about the New York City public schools called InsideSchools.org, a website sponsored by the group Advocates for Children of New York. She is also the author of 3 books called The Best New York City City's best public elementary schools, best public middle schools, and best public high schools. Hi, Clara. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Brian.
So what's the difference between a test and an assessment?
Well, the Department of Ed makes that distinction. I'm not sure most parents would. But the difference between a test is they decide whether you're going to go to the next grade based on a test. An assessment is designed to help the teachers figure out where you are and help you before you get to the end of the year.
So it's not graded in the same way?
It's a little bit like the Princeton Review assessments, which they have now, where you do, it's like a little practice test. And the idea is the teachers can find out whether you're progressing as you should be.
So these are diagnostic tests?
These are diagnostic.
Every 6 to 8 weeks?
They're not going to start them in all the schools all at once. This coming fall, they plan to start them in about 200 schools that are volunteering to do it. It's the following year when they'll be in every school.
And they are, what do they call those, I'm sorry, the special schools, these 200 schools that are going to volunteer to do it, they're called an empowerment zone or something?
These are an empowerment zone, which used to be called an autonomy zone. The chancellor's thought is that some schools should be outside of the jurisdiction of a district, that they should be able to do their own thing as long as they meet certain performance.
The autonomy in these formerly called autonomy schools are basically goes to the principal, right? The principal gets a lot more autonomy to do things his or her way?
That's right. That's the idea. Anyway.
But they have to use these standardized assessments every 6 to 8 weeks.
That's right.
Now, parents, teachers, principals, if anybody's watching who has an opinion about this or a question, Clara Hempill is reporting on it for InsideSchools.org. I know parents who are already organizing protests and petitions and everything else. Are you in one of those groups, or do you have a question about the idea of standardized diagnostic assessments for kids in the public school every 6 to 8 weeks in New York City? 212-251-0801, 212-251-0801. Are the types of tests that they will use different for different ages?
Yes. They haven't decided yet what they're going to do for high school. What they're going to do for kindergarten, first and second grade is a one-on-one where the teacher sits with the child in the hall or in a quiet place in the classroom and says, can you read this word? Can you read this sentence out loud? What they're going to do in grades 3 through 8 are more like the standardized bubble tests where you ask multiple choice questions, and those can be graded by computer.
So what do you see as the potential upsides and potential downsides of this?
I think the potential upside is for teachers who don't really have a grip on how their students are doing. This might give them a little help. The potential downside is the more time you take doing assessments, the less time you spend teaching. Somebody said that if you weigh a cow every 2 weeks, it's not going to gain weight any faster than if you weigh it every month. What you need to do is feed the cow. Similarly with children, testing them more often doesn't make them learn more. You have to teach as well.
Yeah, but you do want to know, and in our overcrowded classrooms, maybe it's hard for the teachers to know how every kid is doing at close enough intervals in both language arts and reading to really help each kid as much as we can.
I've talked to a few teachers about it, and the kindergarten teachers seem to be a little more accepting of it than the upper grade teachers. Sitting one-on-one with a child and saying, can you read this passage, seems to be a pretty good way to figure out whether or not the child can read. The upper grade teachers are much more skeptical. They think that the brief multiple choice questions don't really let them know what they need to know about the children.
Let's take a phone call. Doug on Staten Island, you're on the air. Hello, Doug.
Good afternoon, good evening, I should say, Brian.
Hi.
And I'm in the education system, and what I have found, I have the unusual ability to look at this a little bit more in a total kind of a montage there, because I've been in the elementary, I've been in the intermediate, and I'm now in the high school. And what I've found from teachers is that they feel that they spend most of their time teaching to the test. They feel that this whole idea of putting teachers into an assembly line of widgets, teaching certain things. I know a teacher who went for an interview, and he was about to take the job, and he wanted to tell the principal what he was looking for. Instead, he got one of these Jack Welch types out of the new school of principalship, who said, no, we have 4 fourth grades here, and I want to be able to walk into each 4th grade and have the teacher doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same moment.
But let me ask you a question about that, Doug. In a system of 1.2 million students and 80,000 teachers, teacher quality is likely to be so variable, and we keep hearing how the worst teachers, by and large, are stuck in the worst schools. That's not to say every teacher teaching in a low-performing school is bad. There are many, many dedicated teachers out there. But if teacher quality is very variable, and you have so many kids who are not learning, not eventually graduating high school, is there some merit in trying to standardize how teaching is done to make sure they don't fall below a certain threshold of quality?
As part of the problem, I would say yes, but teaching children to give answers to questions of which they don't even understand the fundamental premise of it is not the solution. I will grant you, being in the union, the one fallacy that I have is that, unfortunately, there's too many schools where, unfortunately, the newest teachers coming in are put into this baptism of fire. So that, I think, should be addressed. But unless you get support from the system, lower class sizes, an administration that looks at teachers as professionals and says, please, let's discuss this, let's compromise. The whole idea of teaching is that we should all be gauged towards making sure that our students are prepared for the world. When you look at the latest survey of some 100,000 kids, and 52% of them said that they don't think that television or newspapers should be able to publish an article without the government's approval. We have a problem.
So you're talking about educating in a broader way, not just to the standardized tests. Doug, thank you very much. Clara, you're here as a journalist, but put yourself in the shoes of Chancellor Klein. What do you think he would say to that caller?
Oh, I don't know. I think he has a tremendously difficult job, the Chancellor, and I think he inherited a very unequal system. And I think he's been conscientious about trying to get some kind of education in the hundreds of schools where really nothing was going on before. I disagree with this particular way to do it, but I don't question his motives.
Yeah. How much time do you think the new testing regimen will take from other things? That was one of the caller's concerns. And in order to teach to these bubble tests, will they be teaching to the test all year now? Will enrichment and fun in learning and teaching social context, like he was saying at the end of his call, become nearly impossible?
I think it's worse for the teachers than it is for the students. They now give the Princeton Review tests twice a year. I asked my 7th grader what they were like. He says it's no big deal. It just takes a couple of hours. We don't prepare for them. We don't care what the results are.
They don't prepare for them?
No. I think for the teachers, it's more time-consuming. It's an administrative task trying to figure out how to grade the exams, although they say it'll be done by computer. I think it does take a lot of the joy out of education. William Butler Yeats said that education is about lighting a fire, it's not about filling a bucket. And these tests are really about filling a bucket. They're not about sparking kids' curiosity about the world.
Do the principals or teachers' unions like this idea?
The principals and teachers' unions are taking a sort of wait-and-see attitude. They haven't been consulted on it. They haven't been given a lot of details. They don't really know. What's interesting is that more than 350 principals have applied to be in the empowerment zone. So that means that more than 350 principals are willing to undergo this regimen of new testing.
That's about a third of all the principals in the city.
That's right, a little less than a third.
That means it's a relatively popular idea.
Seems like it, yeah.
Let's take
Of course,
a look.
they haven't seen the details either. So.
Right, and they probably volunteered to be in the autonomy zone before they knew about this particular piece.
I don't know. That's possible.
Ellen in Bay Ridge, you're on the air. Hello, Ellen.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
My comment is, from my experience in the school system with older students, all assessment tests tend to be reading and math tests that you're assessing by their ability to read a question. There are certain students who are very strong readers, and they always do very well on these tests. Certain students, for some reason, whether it's lack of vocabulary or a variety of disabilities or the reasons are infinite, cannot take, they're not good test takers. They have reading problems and math tests.
So Ellen, let me do a little.
They always get the same results. The assessments will never change.
Let me do a little thought experiment or hypothetical with you here.
Mm-hmm.
You are teaching a class of 35 kids.
Mm-hmm.
You have some, as you say, who are going to do well on these tests. You're probably not too worried about those students.
Correct.
You have others who you're seeing from these assessments are having trouble with reading comprehension or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Does that not give you some kind of useful information with which you can help those children?
I'm aware of the information already, and we try to present the material in different ways, and in a different way they are understanding it. But they are never going to perform at a level perhaps that they should be great. They're learning stuff. They may learn more about the human body, and they may understand it, but when it comes to writing it and putting it on paper...
So you're saying, and I got to go because we're running out of time, but you're saying the tests don't even necessarily measure that well whether they comprehend or not. Clara, we have less than a minute left. Do you think this is going to explode? This has been in the papers a little bit, but are we going to see massive parent protests when this gets more formally announced?
I think you'll probably see massive teacher protests. The teachers I've talked to say this will drive them bonkers. And a certain number of them are already frustrated with the existing testing regimen, and a certain number of them are threatening to quit.
New York City's best public elementary schools, New York City's best public middle schools, New York City's best public high schools, your 3 books, InsideSchools.org, your website. Clara Hempill, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
And that's it for tonight's show. We are here live Wednesday nights at 7:30 in May and June. And don't forget to check out my daily radio show weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC, New York Public Radio. Tomorrow morning, former CIA analyst turned novelist Bob Baer on the cult of the suicide bomber. That's the same Bob Baer played by George Clooney in the movie Syriana. And that'll be on 93.9 FM and 820 AM tomorrow morning at 10. Have a great night.